exiting the show last week, we're going to talk about preparing for an event. And I still think this is where most golfers that I talk to, whether it be weekend warriors to really high-end players, really, I think a lot of them struggle with preparing for events. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But before we do, Chris George, how are we doing? And are you surviving the weather?
We are doing great. We had a lot of ice melt today, so I am looking forward to warmer weather.
Thank God, right? And Mike, how are you been? You been traveling?
Yeah, down at the Waste Management Phoenix Open for the week.
I think I saw
Um,
the video of you running naked across the golf course. Was that you?
yeah, yeah.
No, that wasn't
That
you.
was
Okay.
crazy. I
Must
didn't
have
even
been
know
another
that happened
doctor. I
until
don't know
then.
who it was.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that something? Of course, it's going to happen down there at that tournament.
Yeah, it's gotten
I did get
gotten
a
wilder.
really close up experience with being right next to the tee box on 16 on Thursday and Friday during the player I work with when he was there. So we were allowed in there to watch and to look around and hear everything they're saying.
The
Yeah,
humanity.
it's gotten to a point where people are just really seeming to root for really bad shots so they can just boo and yell things at them. That's what it seems like to me,
Yeah. The fan
which
is
isn't
trying to
really great.
become part of the show.
Yeah, they are. That's for sure. Yep, they want
That's
to be the
fine.
story.
Well, that's why I don't go to that event at all. That one's chaos
Yeah.
at best. So, but no. So let's talk about preparing and I was thinking a big show preparation, but there's so much to it. So I'm starting to think. Let's talk about leading into an event. From we'll say we have a few weeks out, and by an event we're talking about you're a competitive golfer of some sort. Doesn't mean you're a tour player. It could be a club player. It could be playing USGA events or some state events. And so with a lot of those, you're going to have some time in between events. So we're going to say we have about a month, give or take. So kind of the preparation of, okay, I have an event coming up in 4 weeks. What are those progressions to get ready for the event? How can I prepare for the event better? And then how can my preparation allow me to be mentally ready to go compete in an event is kind of where I'm going with this. And preparation is probably not what you think, or a lot of people might think it's a lot of range work, grinding harder, doing more work. It's probably not that. It's kind of preparing for what's getting ready to happen. So Chris, give me a good definition of how would you define preparing for an event?
Yeah, I would say preparing for an event consists of three key elements. And I think the first one is you keep the systems you have in place in place. So if you have practice protocols or you're working on contact ball striking skills or skills to work your dispersion to be smaller and your swing refinements, let's call them, those all should always stay in place, and you're refining them, and your reps and how you're doing that and the things you're doing are there. That really is separate. That's a daily. We'll call that a daily multivitamin, if you will. That's aside from what you would do for tournament prep. Tournament prep would be first is kind of the current venue of whatever golf course you're going to play. So, given the description you talked about with, it could be a club tournament, it could be a USGA qualifier. The first thing I would do is do some research on one, the golf course. So you could use a multitude of apps to lay out what you're going to hit off the tee, what distance you may have in. So you have a preliminary game plan from a strategy standpoint on club selection, especially on par threes, third shots on par fives, go for it maybe on par fives if the situation is warranting it. So the layout is really important of kind of how you structure your practice for yardages, the number of balls you hit with certain golf clubs, those kinds of things. The next layer of that would be looking into what are the six hardest holes historically, what are the middle six, and what are the easiest six. So if you look at the hardest six holes scoring average wise that are playing over par potentially, You certainly want to spend a little more in-depth look at those holes from a strategy standpoint, because if the scoring average is 4.5 on a par 4 or 5.3 on a par 5, and you happen to make birdie, or you have a good strategy and you stick to the game plan, you're incrementally going to pick up strokes gained on the field. So that makes a big difference on how you prepare. And then the third piece of that is nutrition, hydration, kind of how you go through your practice regimen for tournament preparation, which, again, like I said, is in addition to your normal ball striking practice. So this would be more performance-based practice. It might be going on the golf course and just working every hole on putting the ball at the par 5 scoring distance you may be hitting that third shot in, and work on getting the ball up and down from that distance on every hole. It might be just working on par 3 yardages on every hole. So you're not playing the golf course from tee to green. Even more in depth, you might do a look at weather, which I think is really important, on wind direction, temperature, especially wind direction. So you try and prepare as best you can for holes that are going to play into the wind or crosswind, so you get a really accurate yardage for those sight lines and your carry distances. So as you move through that, let's say it's a 15 to 20 day period prior to the event, yes, you're still doing your normal practice, but you really kind of back out of the reps and you're more performance oriented. And then you overlay that with games. So let's say you're a player where you do hit 10 greens in regulation. 5 of those hopefully are inside of 20 feet. So you're going to take 5 balls, drop them from 9 to 20 feet, and you need to make, let's just say, 2.5 of those. 3 would be a great number. So when you drop those balls down there, you're starting to create that performance environment to make a proper number of putts that would really allocate you, depending on your player level. Now that number changes if you're, a 10 handicap. But the idea is the harder you make practice, the better you're prepared. And then keeping your expectations realistic as you go into the event.
All right. So that's a very good description of it. Mike, how would you describe, kind of on the mental side, what what preparing for an event would look like? Looking multiple weeks out, and then we'll kind of dive deeper as we get closer to the event. So if you had a player and they have 4 weeks, give or take, and it's a big event for them. Maybe it's the club championship, maybe it's the U.S. Open, but as that pressure, as there's that end goal, that pressure starts to ramp up, that feeling of, am I doing the right things and all that? So what does that look like for you?
Well, yeah, that pressure. Basically, I just define pressure as stress in a performance situation. And so pressure, stress. And there's a couple of kinds that I think the player needs to understand the kind that they have. One is positive stress and one's negative. And the positive stress is when they have motivations for the event that they're looking forward to and excited about fulfilling or achieving. The negative stress is when they have the avoidance oriented kinds of motivations where they're more fearful and of the various things that could happen that they don't want to have happen. So for instance, positive stress, when they're going to look forward to the event and be excited, might be they want to test their game. Now, I really believe that a competitive event is the absolute best experience to get the most feedback from your game. Yeah. And so if they have the goal of testing their game, that could be something they could be excited about. Some people are striving for excellence in some ways, or even personal growth, and a competitive event might provide that kind of challenge for them to continue to grow. Or maybe they're trying to develop courage or understand how they to regulate themselves better, or they're trying to figure out how to enjoy a situation in which they're competing against others, etc. So those are some things or they might just want to win.
Yeah.
Of course, winning would be also could be something they're looking forward to if they think they actually have a chance, right? So then there's the negative kind of stress where they might be avoiding loss or they feel like it's a test of their worth. They might be worried about embarrassment, letting people down, letting themselves down, going backwards in their career, um, uh, putting so much work in, and then it not panning out. The fear of disappointment. The You talked about expectations, Chris, and I think some people are afraid to truly prepare for a competitive event because they've experienced that strong preparation and then the disappointment of not doing as well as they would have expected given the investment they put into it, and that hurts. And so I think people start to avoid preparation after a while, due to that sense of disappointment, and it's similar to a situation where people expect great things from you or say these wonderful compliments about your game while you're out there playing, and then you start getting self-conscious and fearing not being able to live up to what people think about your game. And so those are similar things and common things that can hurt people. But so I don't think the motivation is the first thing. Getting that locked down so that people aren't going to be worried about it 4 weeks before, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week, and it just getting worse and worse up until the beginning of the tournament. You'd want people to be able to prepare in a way where their fear isn't getting in the way of their decisions about how they prepare. And so that would be like my number one thing. Making
Yeah.
sure you understand why you're going to want to play in this competitive event and have it in something that's constructive and useful for you. So that's number one. Number two, I would say, is trying to figure out the kind of goals that you want to work on that matter to you during your competitive event. And in sports psychology, typically there are three that people use. They talk about process goals, they talk about performance goals, they talk about outcome goals. But in general, what a process goal is any physical or mental action that you want to engage in. It's a procedure or a behavior. And I think it's important for players to start figuring out what those processes are so they can practice those processes during training, during practice rounds on the course, and even possibly off the course. So they need to define those processes very carefully and specifically and have practiced them so that they're not going in just saying, oh yeah, I'm just going to focus on the process and not having actually practiced it so they know what could get in the way of those processes, because there's all sorts of things that can get in the way of actually doing it. So that would be process goals. And performance goals might be of interest as well. Those are more skill based measures. Those are typical things like a score, that could
Yeah.
be proximities, fairway, first cut, tee shots, greens and reg, all of those kind of things that might be useful and that may add something other than the score. The score
Yeah.
could be something. But yeah, that might be useful for people because a lot of people are trying to stay away from thinking about the score. And if you have these performance goals throughout the round, those are things you can continue to be motivated to go after beyond the process goals. And people have more control over the process goals, a little less control over the performance goals, but they have more control over performance goals than they do outcome goals. Now, the outcome goals are just the implications of process and performance. So, what's going to happen based on your scores and your ranking in the field, and what does that all mean to a person? And I don't think it matters if somebody has an outcome goal a little bit further away from the tournament event, but I don't think they need to be thinking about the outcome goals while they're there. It's just unnecessary anymore. It's not like they're going to forget that it matters to them. So just let that be something that might allow themselves to be motivated to prepare, but then let it go.
Yeah.
Let that go and get those performance and process goals really um, put forth, and actually evaluate practice rounds on the basis of process and performance goals. You can do that, and you can start to learn how to evaluate a competitive round because you've already been evaluating your other rounds on the same basis.
No, I think that's brilliant. When I think of preparing for an event, 4 weeks out, look, at a longer time where we might be addressing some skill components, some bigger pieces that might need to be addressed. I mean, we've seen trend wise, we do have a little window here to actually fix it. It's not like the tour where you go week in, week out, and it's Band-Aid, Band-Aid, Band-Aid until you have a break. So you do have that time to kind of massage a skill, maybe build something or maybe even build something that I need for the event coming up. But I think preparation is preparing for to remove surprises, like knowing again that the wind tends to be in your face on the longest par three on the course. So maybe I got to learn to hit a driver off a tee box on a par three to be able to reach it, which is most players don't do or think of. And I think that preparation is that building that trust, getting you ready for the event, and also getting ready for you don't control any of it. The ability to be able to, I saw players that I hit a 6-iron here every week. Every time I've played in the past, the wind wasn't 25 in your face, or they moved you up 2 tee boxes, and you didn't even notice. And I had a player do this once. They moved us up way up. They didn't notice. They just went to their book, saw whatever, and they hit an iron that I don't know if it ever came down. I think it went over the first 2 houses, and I don't know where it ended up. And he's like, whoops. So I think that preparation is kind of getting you ready for all the craziness that's getting ready to happen as well. And Chris, when people think planning and getting ready for an event, they think of a hard-nosed, hole one, I'm going to hit this. Second shot will be this. Third shot, if I miss the green, I will be here, and it will be this. And they think this is a big, rigid system, like a game plan, maybe like the NFL. Like, we're going to script the first 20 plays, and this is what's going to happen. So I'm just going to script the first, 20 holes and just see how it works. Where do players go wrong in preparation that you see that might get a little on the rigid side, or might think that they can control all the variables leading into the day?
Yeah, I think the first thing is they need to know that they're going to face adversity. They need to know that they're going to have their best laid plans change. It's just a matter of the way it works. It could change for a multitude of reasons, but the decisions or the plans that you make ahead of time, and then you go into executing those, and usually this is kind of how it starts, is the outcome of the shot doesn't go the way you had hit it all week, right? Or the way you had planned to hit it. And now you may be out of position. And, your response to that is very, very crucial, to get the ball back in position and do your best to make the minimum number possible, instead of panic and try and do something that you have not practiced or you have not prepared for, such as a knockdown 5-iron from 210 under a tree curving at 30 yards left or right. Like, why all of a sudden we or these players feel like, well, that's a great idea, I'm going to try that shot, and you've never practiced that shot. Like, you're just literally compounding the mistake. You're pouring fuel on the fire to make a big number. So that decision making, that awareness of how you respond to that situation is really, really crucial.
Yeah, I agree, and kind of thinking your way, Mike. What about kind of being able to create for the player? How can they handle or react positively to a shot that's a little wayward, opposed to now? I'm not saying no. Don't be stoic if you're not stoic. Be who you are. But what are some methods or some ideologies on how to react and how to train to react better to situations, I guess is what I'm
Yeah,
trying to say.
yeah, yeah. I mean, There's so many players who struggle with this, of course, because it's either a big surprise or a big disappointment or a frustration or if you have an important goal in front of you, which is the shot, and it doesn't work out, frustration does make sense, that you're going to experience it. So um, there are some sports psychologists who will just say, hey, give yourself 10 seconds, give yourself 20 seconds, give yourself a certain amount down the line just to go ahead and be a little upset about it, whatever. I always say, well, you don't want it to be too intense if you're going to do that. And I don't have an issue with emotions being experienced on a golf course at all either. But I don't want it to be too intense. It's nice to have a scale of 1 to 10 and know and like in practice, knowing and labeling the intensity of any given emotion that you experience. So you know what that range is that allows you to recover for the next shot
Yeah.
and be able to hit the shot well. And then knowing where you just can't get to. So they need to learn how to regulate themselves so it stays lower and not for such a long duration. So that would be like one thing. It's not to try to be unrealistic and say you're not going to experience an emotion. It's like, yeah, like you said, being stoic as if you're going to be indifferent about everything is probably not what is a realistic way for a lot of people anyway. So that's number one. Number two, there's certainly other ways. There's different things you can do. You either correct or celebrate, I guess, is another thing. Though some people talk about that, right? So you correct it and get a sense of what you just did to create a shot that didn't go the way you planned, and then you do a rehearsal so you have a sense that you can do it, and then you can move on. Or if it was a shot they actually liked, then a little bit of a internal celebration. Whatever, it could be external. It just depends, but it depends on the personality. The way I like to have people do is eventually describe the shot. This is an interesting exercise, and a lot of people have a hard time doing it because it takes full concentration to do it, really, in a sense. So to describe the shot as fully in the sensory details as possible. It's like if you could do a practice round and you decided I'm going to do this for every shot, off the tee or every approach shot, and you're going to describe just what that ball did off the face of the club all the way to landing and rollout, spin, etc. Just I like that, and I also like the idea of having a full image of the shot through different sensory systems, the feels and the sounds and the visuals before the shot, not for everybody, but for a practice round to do that so that you're fully focused in on the perceptual details of what you want to have happen, and then you're going to be fully focused on the perceptual details of what happened. I think the contrast between those two enhances learning. That's why I think it's the most beneficial.
Yeah.
But it's also a wonderful way to deal with the other kinds of meanings of a poor shot. So I really like that. I think it's useful, and I think it occupies the mind in a way that is really productive going forward.
No, I like
Right.
that, and I do something along the same lines. If I've never worked with a player and they show up for like a putting lesson, and my number one question for them is they're on the putting green. I'm like, all right, I'm blind. I can't see you. Describe your putting stroke to me. Like, tell me what's moving, when's moving, what the ball's doing, what the face is doing. And most of them look at me like, are you effing nuts? I'm like, if you don't know what's happening, how am I going to help you to be able to move this putter better? So I think, that along that same lines, like if you can't describe and feel and understand what's happening, yeah, you're penalizing yourself from becoming a better player. But I think, Chris, to circle back what you talked about earlier, we're at 4 weeks, we're at 2 weeks, we're getting closer. You said we're going to start to change some of our practice from more skill, swing mechanics, not a good word, but working on swing and kind of motion pieces to starting to think about more performance based and preparation. So can you give us an idea of a couple of things you would like to do with the player as now we're at 2 weeks out, maybe we're in the week of, what does that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, I would certainly be on the golf course a lot more than I'm on the range.
Amen.
I mean, you got to practice hitting balls and keep the maintenance on the ball striking. However, you need to, I would say, if you wanted a number, 70% of your time on the golf course is a great place to spend it. And then the challenges of those, kind of matching up the distances, the shot shapes, the holes into the wind, downwind, crosswind as best you can. Finding a golf course maybe if near you that has similar conditions, even if you have to travel a little bit, I think is really, really important. Bermuda greens versus bent greens, potentially if you're playing on different types of grass than you normally play on, I think is a huge benefit to your putting. And then playing for score. I think making games on the golf course where you have to validate a par, where you, let's say you play a hole and then you have to drop a ball in a bunker and get it up and down, or then the next hole you drop it from a rough short-sided and you have to get it up and down. Playing 6 holes at a time differently than you normally would, with challenges of put the ball in a position off the tee that's still in play, but it's absolutely where you don't want to be. And you have to figure out how to make no worse than bogey from that point. And you do that 6 holes in a row, you're going to start to grind. You're starting to challenge yourself mentally. You're going to feel different emotions. You're going to feel different frustrations, even in practice. But you're going to start to understand how to score, how to get the ball in the hole, again, relative to your skill level and player level. But it helps you problem solve. It helps you then when you're in a tournament and you hit the ball off line and it's out of position, all of a sudden you go get to your ball and you go, well, I've done this before. I've hit this shot. I've practiced this shot. I know what this feels like. I'm not all of a sudden going to double down and try and do my, Hail Mary on this one shot to try and save the whole round. It's a lot of golf to be played in a tournament round. Not only that, but in a 2 or 3 or 4 round event.
No, I like that. And Mike, you kind of, let's say, again, we're getting closer to so again, proximity of event is getting closer. So what if a player is sitting there and he calls you up week out or a couple days getting ready to leave, and man, I'm not ready. What are you going to tell him? Like, I'm just not ready yet. Practice isn't going like I wanted. I'm not striking it nearly what I want. I'm even thinking of Hovland last year, right? Remember, he kept shooting in the 80s, and then he wins an event out of nowhere, right? So what is it, what are those pieces, that you can look at this player and say, hey, you might not have everything lined up exactly how you are, but here's how you're going to go out and really do a good job. What does that look like?
I think it's okay if they were all gung-ho on winning, they can change that goal anytime. People can change goals anytime they want, and if they're feeling like they're not ready and it's a little bit panicky, that's showing that their goals aren't things that they can control.
Gotcha.
That's what it shows. And so you want to help them figure out how to shift those goals to things that they can, I would use the word directly influence.
Yeah.
That'd be a better word for me. I like that better, but directly influence, because I don't think we can fully control all these things. But even our mind, we can do a lot, but not fully all the time. So yeah, I would want to help with that. What's that?
We can't control our brain. What?
Yeah, yeah. I think we can directly influence it. How about that? That's what I like.
Directly influence. There you go.
We can directly influence it. So, yeah, I think that I would first do that. I would help them shift their goal to something that they feel like they can do, and then shift one of the experiences I've had with a lot of different athletes in different sports is that if they're going up against a really difficult opponent, for instance, in tennis, for per se, let's say, and they're going against this opponent and they really don't think they can win. They know they're not as good of a player. Sometimes they have their absolute best performances in that situation because they do give up on all sense of outcome anxiety. and they just decide they're just going to focus in on whatever they can do in the moment on each shot and see if they can pick up the ball a little quicker or something like that, which is more directly influenceable. And they oftentimes will play their best against an opponent that they don't think they could ever win against because they realize they're just better, they're more highly skilled. So I think something like that attitude is often in golf that can be useful. Let's see what I can do in this tournament, given where I'm at. Let's just see what I can do. It's not to give up on their ability to perform, but they don't even have to think about all the rest of it. And they can learn quite a bit from an experience like that. And oftentimes mentally, they might be better off in that kind of a state, I would
Yeah,
say.
I would agree with you, and I think that's an interesting way of looking at it because I know as a college coach, we would always be like, don't get out of the van if you don't think you're going to win this event. Like, we've got to go to the first tee. Now, granted, we have 5 players, all 5 of you can't win, but if we're not prepared and not thinking in the direction that you have a chance to win this event, I've made a mistake of bringing you on the trip, but we need to be prepared for you to go on that first tee and perform. And now your 5s are probably not going to win, but you know what? If they can say, hey, kind of like you said, if I can go out and just play my best, do what I can control it, go have a great round, and see where that adds up. That's really what we're trying to get them to do.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's a fun one. And I like the fact that, Chris, you always said environmental. And this is the part I think most people get completely wrong, right? If you're in an NFL team and you're getting ready to go play a team that's in a dome, you don't care about weather. So you can practice wherever you want. But if you're getting ready to, go play the Steelers in mid-December, it's going to be cold. It's going to be windy as heck, and you kind of got to get prepared for that. So golfers out there, when we're talking environmental, I'm talking about what the golf course is doing to you. You got to train for the specific golf course, go figure. And also the different conditions. What kind of sand is in the bunker? What kind of grasses on the green and around the green? Is it Georgia? Is it a native green, a native cold grass? Is it Bermuda? Like, what is that? So understanding and preparing environmental wise, give us some insights and any good stories where players have succeeded or failed miserably because they weren't prepared for the environmental conditions.
Oh yeah, we could do a whole show on that. I think that, I'll give you a great example. So let's just say we are a player and we work all day and we practice in the afternoon. Okay, so you're hitting wedge shots off a dry turf. Fairways are always mown. And you're hitting short game shots inside of 50 yards or third shots on par fives, 60, 70 yards. And you play a tournament on a weekend and it's an 8:30 tee time or shotgun. And in the summer, there's dew on the ground, there's moisture on the ground. So you're used to hitting your 60 degree, for example, off of a, nice, clean, dry lie. And you know how far that goes because you've been doing that 4 days a week for a week and a half. And then you get to Saturday morning and you're in that exact location on the third shot on the par five. And it's 8:30 in the morning and there is dew on the ground and you know exactly what you're going to do and you do it. And it barely gets on the front edge of the green. Like, there's a great example that you weren't prepared for the environmental conditions of the slippage of the ball because there was a ton of moisture between the ball and the club face. And that's a great, I see it often in a lot of different levels of tournament play. But that's a great example of just not being prepared, like not practicing in those conditions. Changing the time that you go and practice, and Mike can relate to this, and so can Brian. But we talk at players that are tournament players that may have don't play as frequently as other tournament players. So you have to change the time frame that you practice, or you have to change your daily routine so that you learn how to sleep in later or stay up later to sleep in later so you don't get up until 10:30 or 11 when you hopefully on Sunday have a 2 o'clock tee time. right? You're in one of the final groups. Like that's a massive shift in your total routine, to be able to manage the environment of sleep, manage the environment of the course conditions, manage the environment of your routine of you know, nutrition and feeding times to the golf course conditions. Like that's a massive piece of the puzzle for success.
No, no, I like that, and we'll talk about the nutrition piece there in a minute because that's the part I think a lot of people eating a chili dog at the turn. No, I'm kidding. No, the leading into an event like it's. I think a lot of tournaments are lost way before you actually show up at the venue or leading into tournament rounds. But Mike, thinking of player, let's say you're working with a player maybe that's not used to playing American golf courses, because in the U.S. they typically are more parkland, more manicured. Greens are usually quicker. Maybe someone coming from Europe, Asia, it's a little bit different. So how are you helping them to get ready for the environmental conditions that they're getting ready to face, especially if they don't play a lot in the States?
Yeah. Well, the view and perception of these different conditions would be very important to understand. Um, the changes in how a ball is going to react on a firm green versus the slower greens, and the smaller margin of errors you're going to have
Yeah.
with a quicker um, green, a firmer green, and especially, of course, with the undulations and the very difficult pin placements. And so I think those are all going to be demanding of higher level of standards. That's probably going to happen coming from Europe or some other place and doing the American, especially if we're talking PGA Tour or something.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much if it's they're just coming and playing American courses in general. So, but yeah, being able to do an evaluation of your game in relation to the conditions would be really good. Like, I like to start out with a player and give them what I call a self-efficacy scale I put together of all these very detailed skills in golf, and then have them rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10 with where they're at right now in relation to some standard that they would decide on as a 10. And I would want to do that definitely with someone coming over, and I would probably want to talk through it with them um, after the assessment to see, and during actually before the assessment, so they know they're doing it with American courses versus, and if there are any differences. So if they find that their self-efficacy, which is basically their task-specific confidence in specific kind of shots and specific conditions, then um, they'll know what they need to raise their standards about, and then they'll know that this is something I need to really work on. So that's where I would start, because I care about their um, level of understanding of what their capabilities are on a certain course.
Yeah.
Because so that would be the first thing I'd want to do. Um, and that's the main thing I think would where you'd start, and that could take a long time, and that could really move them into figuring out how they want to prioritize different practice skills, et cetera, or skills that they could practice, I should say.
Yeah, no, I think the hardest part about playing in the States is the fact that we have all the climates, and so if you're traveling on a tour or anything like that, going from playing in the South, playing in Florida, Georgia, to going to California, to going to New York, rolling through the Mid Atlantics, going across the flyover states, like you're getting every grass and every condition is different. So I think that preparation. So when people think American golf, they think, oh, Parkland, but I mean, Parkland in Mid Atlantic is completely different than the Parkland in Northwest, Washington. And the Parkland in Florida is completely different than the Parkland in Indiana. So I think that, those environmental conditions are really tough. And of course, Bermuda, and we'll talk about people just losing their mind over Bermuda, which is always makes me laugh. But that concept of the change of grass, change of venue, and preparing for that is massive. So,
Yeah.
kind of like Chris said, if you're going to play Bermuda, find a golf course that has ideally Bermuda if you can get to it, because there are differences. If you're chipping into the grain, it's going to want to grab onto your golf club. So what can you do to negate that? Well, you can, open the face, defer down a wedge, open the face a little bit, kind of manage some bounce and stuff so it won't grab the club. So there's a lot of cool tricks if you played it and you understand it. But if you just go for the first time into Bermuda and you're hitting a chip shot, up a hill into the grain, it's funny because it's going to happen. And there's going to be a whole lot of chili dipping going on. There's going to be some chunking going on, and they're going to be going, "What the hell's going on? This worked 2 days ago when I was at so and so. This shot worked great. Now I can't even get it off the turf." So those environmental conditions and understanding what that is massive. But I like to go back to travel days. This is probably the number one thing I learned as a golf coach.
Well, can we go back a second? Because I want to go back to this past week, and I won't reference the player that I saw do this, but most people did see this if they were watching the telecast. And a player hit a shot and laid a bit of sod over it, and abruptly grabbed a fairway wood and bumped it up on the next shot. Now, there's a lot to be said for that player had a plan B and knew that, boy, I was in the same situation and I want to make the maximized benefit of proximity to the hole and change that game plan. That's the ability to adapt to those conditions.
Yeah.
That was a terrible spot to do it in too.
Yeah. I just want to follow up on that actually, Chris. And Brian, we were just having this conversation last week, and why is it that golf is considered one of the most difficult or the most difficult game? And I was thinking about my baseball career. I started playing when I was young, all the way to 27. And I don't remember my baseball swing ever really changing. Or like I could swing a bat right now, and I think I would do it the same way as I've done. And I haven't really swung a bat probably in a year. And the point is the adaptability isn't that much for baseball. You've got to be able to adapt to the velocity and spin changes of a pitch coming in and maybe the release point. But for the most part, people think hitting a baseball is the most difficult thing you can do. But I think golf is, and partly and maybe mostly because of the variety and variability and the need for so much adaptability. I don't know what you two think about that, but that's what makes me think golf could very well be the most difficult game.
I always call golf as the decathlon of the the club sports, right? Baseball, again, it's hard to hit a baseball. Don't get me wrong. Baseball, you will look very foolish swinging at a really good pitcher, and you're not a very accomplished hitter. You'll look really bad.
Yeah.
But that same athlete looks really, really bad when if he doesn't play golf and he tees up a little white ball that doesn't move.
That's
and
for
that
sure.
swing and the and everything going around it is really bad as well. So I always said golf is kind of like the decathlete. To be good at golf, you can't be bad at anything. You'll be great at some parts, you'll be not as great in other parts, but you can't be bad at one part and think you can overcome it with other pieces, right?
Yeah.
There's always a kind of a floor. So again, for a decathlete, they're going to be really good at 3 events, but they got to be okay and hold serve everywhere else. So I think that's where golf is the most challenging. It's just so many little parts that you have to be not in control of, but be able to adapt to quickly and survive. And it's a brutal effing game, man. It is. I always say when I look at players, I go, y'all look the crazy ones. You're the ones that decided to play this for a living. You think I'm crazy? What does it say about you? You're the one asking me for advice, and you chose this game. But what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, something comes to mind, and this was again back at the Phoenix Open, and Goddard hit a stinger tee shot, and it was the most unbelievable just execution of a golf shot, because it was so second nature. He just hit this golf shot. It really was not super technical. And I thought, wow, this kid is just getting to the point where he just really can just sees where he wants to hit the ball, and he just gets up there and moves around a little bit, and he hits this golf shot. Like, talk about the preparedness for that, to be in that moment, to be able to manage the distractions that are going on in any event, really, but specifically this one, and just hit that shot with such grace and ease. I thought, man, this is really something special, and I can't wait to see what this kid does in the future, because I think that there's going to be some really cool things. And I just caught a glimpse of it in that one shot, so it was pretty cool to see that.
It's great.
All right, so preparation travel. Most people don't think of this. So professionally, you're traveling from one stop to another stop. Maybe you're playing a USGA event and I'm traveling, I live in the Mid-Atlantic and I'm playing said event in Texas or whatever. So I have airfare, or hopefully you're not driving that, but you might be driving. There's going to be some mechanism for you to get there. This is the number one thing I learned in college golf, and I think our teams were always more prepared because we thought about, as a player, we're saying be prepared, be adaptable, be ready to go play. Well, what we learned inside of the coaching staff is we had to be adaptable and be able to get them ready to make it through travel. So dehydration, you get dehydrated. It takes 2 to 5 days to get the system back into order, depending on how dehydrated you were. If you fly on an airplane, what does everyone not want to do? Use the restroom, right? So what do you not do on an airplane? You don't drink. So you're in a recycled air box, no humidity, and you're refusing to drink because you don't want to disturb the person sitting next to you, and you are just getting dehydrated as a son of a gun. And then what does that mean? Well, now we land, we rush to the hotel, we got to get up at, in 6 hours, we got to get up for our practice round. So we are completely dehydrated, and we haven't even started the event yet. So by the time I get you hydrated, we're probably in the last round. Well, what did that do to the 2 rounds before that? It's not very good, because what happens when you're dehydrated? You think your thought processes can be affected, your energy levels can be, there's a lot of components. So, one of the things that we learned as a coaching staff is stay away from high sodium foods, because again, high sodium messes with dehydration, can get your electrolytes way out of whack, and getting players to be able to drink properly into an event. So our team hated us. We would literally buy water bottles, and we'd be on this amount of flight. We'd be like, you have to drink this amount of water to make sure that when we land, you haven't lost hydration. And they hated us because they're up and down the entire flight going to the bathroom because we are forcing these liquids. But we also learned, and how we learned is we almost lost events. We almost lost in regionals one year because we were so dehydrated when we flew to California. We weren't ready to play. We looked terrible. A little bit of jet lag, a little bit of hydration, not eating correctly, all these components. And that almost kept us from playing in the national championship. So, Chris, do you have any tricks of the trade or anything that you tell your players, food and diet-wise, leading into an event, what this kind of looks like? And of course, don't change because you're in an event, but be who you are and what that looks like.
Yeah. I'll start with, I am definitely not a nutritionist. I am not a doctor, but I can tell you 2 things.
But I did say at a Holiday Inn Express.
Hydration is extremely important, and protein is extremely important. Your muscles need protein. And I think if most people knew the amount of protein you do need to be eating, let's just say as an athlete, right? You're burning a lot of calories, you need protein. Your muscles need protein. They need it for recovery. They need the water for hydration, and that helps. As far as the amount of water, there's a lot of different theories and myths out there, and a lot of different advice out there. If you are thirsty, you need water, right? It's too late.
It's too late. You've already lost.
You need to be drinking enough to where you're not thirsty. I look at the players that always have a water bottle with them. And I'm not talking about like a plastic water bottle. They have a jug, right? The big 32 gallon or 32 ounce jug. And they're always taking a sip out of it all the time. They're always constantly hydrating and refilling it. And it plays a big role in a lot of things, which Mike can speak to about, your mental state and your body is a very high percentage of water, and it's necessary for us to have that water.
Yeah. Yeah. So true.
And then Mike, thinking on the same lines that we have food, we have diet. What if, not saying that I've ever seen this, what if a player says, well, I'm at the biggest event in my life, so I'm used to drinking a double espresso every morning, but I'm going to be healthy and I'm going all in on this event. I'm going to be so good, and I'm going to eat better. I'm going to eat different. I'm going to not drink the caffeine. I'm going to, not listen to my podcast late at night. I'm going to go to bed early. What would you tell that player they're doing right or wrong?
Well, first of all, I would have started this earlier. I mean, it would be really hard to, honestly, it's hard for me to be in a situation like that because I wouldn't know for sure what to predict would happen
Yeah.
if they change everything up.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't know because we have nothing to base it on.
That's true.
And so I would have a hard time being in that situation, knowing what to say. I might just let it ride out and let the player make the decision and see what happens, and we'll learn from it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I wouldn't know exactly what to say in that scenario. And then that would be just an example. And I know I said I wish they would have started earlier, but they would learn to start it earlier and be sure that you have your sleep schedule much more regulated and your eating schedule more regulated. One of the things I wrote in my book was to regulate everything as much as you can so that your feels will not change quite as much as they might typically, because everything's changing in our bodies. Our interoceptions, what's happened with our sensations about what's going on in the body, that changes. Our weight can change during the day. Even our height changes a little bit during the day. So all these things are changing all the time. Get as much as consistent as you can to at least try to reduce some of that kind of variability in feels and so on to help you feel like you're in more control. So that would be my thought on it. And so do this over a long period of time.
Yeah. But
That'd be better.
I have seen stories of this is a big event, or I don't want to let my team down, so I'm going to be healthy on this trip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your body's addicted to a chemical. It's called caffeine.
I know.
Drink it.
That's the thing.
Drink it.
Yeah, you don't want to have withdrawal symptoms while you're out there trying to play.
You're literally addicted to a drug right now. Caffeine is a drug. Like we've got quitting cold turkey to try to help the team might not be our best bet today. Drink a Coke.
Yeah.
No, I think it's interesting because, again, it goes back to kind of like you said, preparing, getting ready. This is all things you need to be thinking about as you're preparing for your event. Where are my meals? Where am I going to eat? What am I going to eat? When am I going to sleep? What am I going to do when tee times get flipped? Or being prepared for an event is much more than, can I hit a 6-iron? Can my face path ratio be perfect for XY? That's important, but events are much more, and travel just in itself it can be a nightmare. We used to always say as a team, we're going to travel, and we know we're going to have 1 to 2 calamities happen. Don't know what they're going to be, but there will be a calamity, and then how we respond to that calamity is how we're going to be able to play this week. So understanding that, again, oh, what? We rented a van. You have no vans. We have 8 people. Okay. What can we do? Well, we have 2 cars, but they can only fit 7 of us. Okay. What about the luggage? Well, we can, those components as well. So I think having that preparation and even preparing, you know, getting your golf bag ready, making sure your equipment's right, making sure your equipment's right after you land. I hate to tell you, I've watched golf clubs being loaded in and out of planes for decades. They don't treat them well.
Yeah.
So so your 5 iron might be in tolerance when you take off, but when you land, it might have just became a 4 iron, or it might have just came a 7 iron. And so again, making sure that those component, like the equipment, is still where we want it to be in those components. So yeah, this goes back to kind of what Mike said. A baseball bat's a baseball bat. It doesn't really change, but a golf club getting kicked around, or
Yeah.
even you being grumpy and slamming on, like, you're changing potentially what that equipment does. So yeah, I think preparing for an event is much more than what people think. So the good coach, the good player, is going to rationalize all this out and make sure we're prepared for what's getting ready to happen. And I think that is, again, I think the number one rule is just being ready for variance, being ready for the unexpected, and how am I going to adapt to what's getting ready to happen. Because again, 72 holes, multiple days. My favorite was the hotel dates got wrong, and we had to change hotels in the middle of a tournament because they were like, "Oh no, you guys are supposed to leave on, no, we're here for 2 more days." So again, just having that understanding of, okay, well, we're just gonna have to move our stuff. It's gonna be fine. Don't worry about it. And so I think, again, just being prepared and being in the right position to deal with just chicanery, and golf is nothing but, and that's the fun of it. To me, that's the fun of it. I always tell people when I go to a golf course I've never seen, I said, my mentality going out there is really simple. I have a set of skills, and this golf course is going to want to either enhance or diminish my skills, and let's see who wins. Do my set of skills allow me to perform at a high level on this golf course, or maybe this golf course is just going to beat me over the head today, which is, what it is, and I'm going to laugh. I'm going to laugh my way through it, but being ready, as much ready as my skill set can be, and just go attack this golf course and go have fun. I think if a lot of people took that attitude, it would be, golf's a lot more fun. But we'll close this down. Like I said, next month we'll talk about being at venue, because that is just a whole new can of worms. We've actually gotten there. Hopefully we're hydrated, we're eating well, we're sleeping well, we're not in a fight with our family members. We're on pace. We're one track mind, thinking about where we're going and what's going on and what that looks like. Because again, proximity of goal, as Mike talked about in Golf Cats Life magazine, as that goal gets closer and closer, everything's starting to change. And how do we adapt to that? And as a coach, how can we help them manage? I'll just leave it there. So Chris, any final notes you want to hit anybody with on, preparing all the way up until travel, what that looks like, and then, any great insight you want to circle back on?
Yeah, I think that being patient is really important, and we're all going to experience some stress, some anxiety about this upcoming event. And just know that the little things that you do day in and day out through the process that allow you to be successful help you become more confident in your skills. And then once we get on site, then that's where we really start to do some on-course work, and know that we are prepared to win.
There you go. How about yourself, Mike? Any closing thoughts?
I just think going back to making sure you know why you're playing this competitive event. What are the reasons? What are your motivational factors that are really playing the strong role there? Making sure that you practice the different kinds of goals that you're going to have during the tournament event. And those are always found inside the processes throughout a tournament event. And so go ahead and practice those, and that would help clarify what they're trying to do on a shot by shot and even within shot basis during a tournament, which is what they can influence. Those are the two main things I would say.
Cool.
Keep in mind.
And I would say patience is great, process is great. Just be ready for all heck to break loose and just laugh at it and say, I can adapt. It's not that big a deal. You know,
Yeah.
there's other rental cars, there's other restaurants, there's other hotels, there's other, you name it. My driver broke. There's other drivers. We can track something down in the next day. Like, I've seen it all going into events, and it just makes you laugh, and it's a great. You chose the game, people. You chose it.
Yeah.
That tells a lot about you. Uh, so we'll be back in a month. Chris, where can they find you online? And on this great planet, where can they find Chris George Golf?
You can find me at chrisgeorgegolf.com.
Nice. And if you're in the Williamsburg area and you're willing to chip out some snow, Chris will take care of you.
Come on by.
Yeah, that's right. Mike, how about yourself? Where can they find you?
At Dr. Mike Grevlos on Instagram.
Oh,
And
nice.
and the
Nice.
motivationgame.com.
There you go. Cool. We're at Golf Cast. Come find us. Come hang out with us. It's a good time, and we look forward to bringing you some more nonsense here in a couple weeks. So thank y'all for listening. And actually, I got a bunch of people that commented on the last one, sent a bunch of messages inside of Golf Cast, and there was a bunch of people listening live. They just didn't ask questions while we were doing it, which was kind of funny. But that's cool. There are people listening live to us. So, hey, keep sending questions and things you want us to discuss. We'd love to do it. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you next month. Cheers.